the phenomenology of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And then lastly, we study what's called the Vinaya. We study the rules that a person, the kind of rules and regulation, a person, the discipline a person should keep when they study and practice the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So for that, we study the Vinaya, the 4 Vinaya texts, the 4 Vinaya Sutras, if you like. So that's what we study basically as part of the whole philosophical education, or the education in philosophy we obtain. That is basically all. It's all revolving around the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. Okay, so it's not that hard, right? If you just remember implicit, explicit meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, the logic of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, the phenomenology, and then the kind of discipline that a person studying and practicing those sutras should abide by. Okay? So you could all study that. Right? Those topics.
Did you use the word fashion? Or did I just hear out of my own?
Pardon?
Fashion. Did you use this word?
Fashion?
Fashion.
Pachin. Yeah, pachin just means perfection of wisdom. So that was the implicit, when we study the implicit meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, we call it the study of the perfection of wisdom, although it's actually just the implicit meaning of that. So the Parchin is just a short version of Shiraki Paratu Chimba. Parchin. That's the implicit meaning. Then you study the middle way, then you study logic, Abhidharma, and Vinaya. Those are the short terms for what I just described. It's kind of overwhelming. People usually ask me, what do you study? And I find to put it in that way makes it much easier, to always relate it back to the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, and quoting Hunkin Jamyan Shepa, this great master, who put it that way. Okay? But more specifically, now taking refuge. How does refuge fit into these 5 texts? Well, they fit in as part of the implicit meaning. The implicit meaning, in the sense, it's the method, it's the means to enlightenment. So refuge is a very important topic that is discussed during that time. Later on, during the explicit meaning, when we study Madhyamika or middle way, we don't talk about refuge much. During the study of logic, no, not really. No, it's mentioned, but it's not studied. It's not like studied in detail. Abhidharma, no, it mentions maybe the 3 jewels, but that's about it. And Vinaya, no. Of course, it lays out the Vinaya. It presents the rules, the regulations, the vows, depending on which vows you've taken. But other than that, it doesn't really go into much detail. So it's really during the study of Maitreya's Ornament for Clear Realizations that we study refuge. Okay, so this much just for you to have some background, some understanding where it all fits in. So we pretty much study this towards the beginning of our studies. Beginning means 3rd, 4th years. The 3rd, 4th year, that's still beginning. Okay. Now, if you look at the text, at the booklet, so the explanation of the 3 objects of refuge as presented in this handout, this is based on Maitreya's Ornament for Clear Realizations. That's the text I mentioned, which lays out, as I said, the implicit meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, as well as Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chemu, which again is very extensive regarding its explanation of refuge. Many, many pages on that. So I've taken out things that I thought were most relevant for this particular course. Or Lamrim Chemo, the English translation, is the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. Lamrim Chemo is Tibetan. And the Ornament for Clear Realizations, that is a commentary on the implicit or hidden meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. I already mentioned that. Therefore, it describes the different meditative stages and awarenesses required to become a fully awakened Buddha, from the generation of bodhicitta up to the attainment of the omniscient mind of a Buddha. So it talks about all these different stages. And don't think of it as like the Lamrim. It's not that ordered. It talks about, yes, bodhicitta first, and then it talks about something else, and then something else, and then it goes back to bodhicitta, and back and forth, and you don't study in the fashion of the Lamrim, which is a relatively easy text, a relatively short text, which, well, it's not that short, but the topics are quite few, not that many, just different outlines, and it in a gradual way takes you towards the state of enlightenment. The study of Parchin is very different. It kind of studies about bodhicitta, then about compassion, then about the path of accumulation or the path of preparation, then it goes back to bodhicitta, then it goes path of... So it's like it gives you a good sense of looking at all these different methods, these meditations, from different angles, and to understand them in a slightly different context. And our practice is like that too. It's not like you generate bodhicitta and you never meditate on it again. Bodhicitta is important at the beginning, it is important while you're on the path, and it's important even when you're almost at the goal, once you reached your goal, almost reached your goal, and even once you reached your goal, a Buddha still has bodhicitta, except doesn't have to train in bodhicitta any longer. But bodhicitta, all the way, you have to always go back to it and strengthen it further and strengthen it further once you've cultivated it. Okay? Every quality that you generate needs to be further strengthened, it needs to be deepened. Some qualities are newly attained, but many of them are qualities you already have to a certain degree, and then you need to enhance them. Your love has to enhance, your wisdom has to be enhanced, your patience, your generosity. All those grow stronger, stronger, and stronger. And so it makes sense that you, as part of the study, which reflects your own spiritual development, you go back again and again and understand it even better and deeper and deepen it further. And that is reflected in this going back and forth and looking at it from that angle, etc. Okay. Anyway, so the ornament is composed in verse, the ornament for clear realization. In Tibetan, there's a tradition to just shorten the title, so I've done that here. Just call it the ornament. It's composed in verse and consists of 8 chapters. Each chapter presents one clear realization. And a clear realization refers to a path, or a path consciousness. So each chapter sets forth a path that leads practitioners to Buddhahood, so a specific path. And those are not the ones that you're usually familiar with, like path of accumulation, path. They have really weird names, and we don't need to go into them, but it's a little abstract or a little different from what you usually know when you study, for instance, the Lamrim. And each of these path consciousnesses or clear realizations, just another word for path, they're explained by way of presenting other topics, specific phenomena or topics that characterize each one of the 8. So through studying these topics, one of those path consciousnesses set forth in each chapter becomes clearer. So instead of really explaining that path consciousness, which you also do, but you take other topics that help you to make it clear. Okay? So I'll explain this on the basis of the first chapter. The rest we don't have time to go into. But just to give you like a slight sense of the context in which we study Refuge. For example, the first path, what is the first path? The enlightened mind of a Buddha, the omniscient mind of a Buddha. That is the first path of the first chapter. That's the first chapter's main topic. The path of consciousness described in the first chapter of the ornament for clear realization. So it's got 8 chapters. The first chapter deals with the omniscient mind of a Buddha. Start off with the goal right away. Why? Because, it's your goal. That's what you're aiming for. It's path in the sense that practicing that kind of path leads you to enlightenment. So it's less that once you reach the omniscient mind that you still want to go somewhere. I mean, you reach the highest possible mental state there is. But Nonetheless, it's called a path because when you practice this, it also leads you to enlightenment as you're practicing. And sometimes the name of the cause is given to the result. The name of the cause, here in this case, really a path consciousness, is even given to, like path being like a method, even given to the result. Okay, so the first chapter explains the omniscient mind of a Buddha, which is also called exalted knower of aspects, which is really just saying it knows all aspects, it knows all phenomena, so it's omniscient, by way of 10 topics. The second chapter does so by way of 11 topics, etc. I don't need to read all of those. So if you add up each topic that characterize in each chapter a particular path consciousness, it comes up to 70 topics, which is why the study of Maitreya's text, The Ornament for Clear Realization, is described as the study of 8 paths and 70 topics. Okay, so that is, in Tibetan, everyone knows that description. Once you studied this, so the Dalai Lama, sometimes when he talks about Maitreya, he would say, oh, it's that text which describes the implicit meaning of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras by way of 8 paths, so the 8 chapters, and 70 topics. The 70 topics which characterize, which illustrate those 8 paths. Okay, just to give you like the background. It's not that important, but okay, so this is what it says here. The 10 topics of the first chapter. What are the 10 topics now? That describe, that illustrate enlightenment. That kind of clarify what enlightenment is all about. So you're basically, by looking at these chapters, if you study each of those, these 10 topics that are part of the first chapter, which in general are part of the 70 topics, the omniscient mind of a Buddha becomes clearer and clearer by studying these topics. Okay? Because right now we don't know what that means. So the first topic is bodhicitta. Okay? Through studying bodhicitta, that's a mind we can generate right now, the enlightened mind of a Buddha. We have no idea what that means. But through understanding bodhicitta, the wish to become enlightened, in that way, of course, we learn about enlightenment and what it means to have the omniscient mind of a Buddha. The next are practice instructions. So basically we learn about the mind that wants to become enlightened. This is where prayer comes in the Buddhist tradition. People sometimes ask, what is prayer? Buddhists pray? Prayers are less directed at another person. Of course they can be directed at another person. You'd ask someone for assistance. And we do that in everyday life. We go to see a doctor and ask this doctor to help us. Can other people help us? Of course they can. So we ask them for help. Now in a prayer, you may ask not a person that you can directly address, kind of call them up or have an appointment with them. You may address living beings that we just cannot perceive, but that we believe exist, for instance, the Buddhas. So we ask them. In Tibetan, the word is jilap for their blessing. But blessing in English kind of means, let's just lay back and be blessed. I don't know, what is a blessing anyway? In Tibetan, the word blessing, jinlap, it means to be transformed into something greater. Or to transform into something great. It doesn't really help. That's just the etymology. But it kind of means being inspired. It has that connotation of being inspired. So there is another word for inspire, but they have so many words for ideas that are important. So feeling inspired. So you want to feel inspired by the Buddha so you can continue to go on. So you ask for inspiration, right? Because in the end, blessing means that someone does it for you. Inspiration means someone encourages to such a degree that you continue doing it. So it's got much more of a sense like you're kind of you're encouraged to go on, being inspired. Okay, being encouraged, inspired. I don't know. I can't think of another word. So therefore you make prayers actually to ask for assistance, which is totally normal, but mainly you create the causes and conditions for you going there, because that's just how the mind works. I mean, in general, any goal you set to yourself, the first step is to have the wish. The first step, like you want to go to university, for instance, you have to have the wish first. So you generate the wish, I want to go to university, and then you start working to create the causes and conditions, whatever those are, until eventually you get there. So, therefore, prayers, bodhicitta is kind of a wishing type of mind, wishing for something. In fact, when we talk about method and wisdom, those two aspects, method is usually a mind that wishes for something. Right? For instance, love wishes for others to be happy. Compassion wishes for others to be free from suffering. Rejoicing, okay, rejoicing is not so much wishing, it's more like being happy for someone else's success. So there's not wishing, but also it includes like wishing them to be well. It's motivated by the wish for them to be happy, and then to rejoice if you find they are happy. So there's a lot of minds that are part of the method aspect. Bodhicitta is the wish to become enlightened. This is also part of the method of Buddhism, versus understanding, rational understanding, realization, wisdom. Okay, so you have those two aspects, method and wisdom. And Buddhist practice can be divided into those two. Now, bodhicitta is the first step. With regard to Mahayana practice, you want to go there. First thing is, you want to go there. But of course for the benefit of other sentient beings. Okay? That's important. But then the second topic then is, well, it's not enough to be kind-hearted and to just wish to become enlightened. Now you need instructions. You need to be guided there. You need to know what kind of minds to generate, how to do it. How do you become enlightened? And then once you have bodhicitta, you have already entered the Mahayana path, which is called the Mahayana path of accumulation. But from the path of accumulation, once you receive practice instructions, you then need to enter the path of preparation, the next level. So that's the third topic you study. And then you very thoroughly go through the explanations, you study them, you debate them, and whatever you can internalize, you internalize. Then you hear about Buddha nature, really important topic, Buddha nature. Because once you reach the path of accumulation and the path of preparation, well, now you know you can actually, that you have all Buddha nature, you possess Buddha nature. Actually, on the path of accumulation, once you realize emptiness, you really understand that there's Buddha nature. Okay? So to have Buddha nature, to really incontrovertibly know that, you need to have an understanding of emptiness. Then what are the objects of focus of the Mahayana practice? Because a path is a consciousness, it has an object. So what is that mind? What do they focus on? What is their main focus? Okay, that's important. It's basically all phenomena. Everything becomes your focus. But how that is the case, why is that a focal object? That's what you study. It's brief, it doesn't take long, the focal object. And what are the three great objectives of Mahayana practice? Right? So the three main aspects are to eliminate what is to be eliminated, and to realize what is to be realized, and to attain enlightenment. Right? That's basically the main objective. And then from there on, you talk about the last 5 aspects, the armor-like practice. You talk about a particular kind of practice. So, having said what I said earlier on, then you focus on the kind of practice. Armor-like practice. What is armor-like practice? That sounds weird. That sounds like a term from the army. Armor-like. So they use a lot of military kind of language, in the sense that the real true enemy are our own afflictions, and we fight against them. And fight against them doesn't mean through violence in the traditional sense, but through strong action, because these are very powerful. So armor, like, what is the armor? It's our motivation. Whenever you hear the word armor, the armor, protection, is always our motivation. Our motivation is that which protects us. And then there's the engage practice. So you need to engage the mind to develop calm abiding, the 6 perfections, the Arya path, path of seeing, etc. So it's like to not just protect the mind through motivation, but to engage, to actively engage and engage in practice.
That's 8.
That's number
8. 9.
No, this is when I practice, engage practice.
There's 2 9s.
There's 2 9s. Oh, that's why. Okay, yes. So number 8 would be actually be engaged practice. And number 9 means not only do we engage in those practices, we have to accumulate merit. We have to engage in a lot of positive actions to accumulate enough positive potential. So positive potential is not something you can see. It's a potential in the mind, but one of my teachers, he describes it to money in the bank. The more money in the bank, the more options you have in terms of starting a business, starting anything you want to do, if you wish to do something. So what does that mean? Like merit, positive karma, being able to accomplish your goals? How do those 3 fit together? Well, it's actually quite simple. Basically, we do talk of positive karma, or of something positive, something virtuous. That is just the name given in relation to what we want. Does that make sense? So in relation to what we want, we consider that to be positive. In the last course, I gave the example of one of my teachers starting a session by saying, the Buddha is bad, anger is good, love is bad, hatred is good. Very confusing. And then he said, well, the reason the Buddha love is bad, because love harms suffering. It harms something. It harms suffering, so anger is bad. Love is bad. Anger is good because it benefits suffering. Right? We can talk like that. It's true. It destroys suffering. Love destroys, so it harms suffering. But we don't want suffering. Which is why we don't talk like that. If we wanted to suffer, if we would like suffering, hypothetically, if that were our human situation, then we would be encouraged to be hateful and angry because it leads to suffering. Right? So this is when in Buddhism, sometimes people say, well, but in Buddhism there's no good and bad. No. Of course there's good and bad. There's ethical and unethical. There's positive and negative. But it is not an absolute positive and negative, like independent of anything, there's just an absolute positive and negative. Just as there's no absolute long, quality of being long in this stick, or an absolute being short in this stick. When I ask you, is it long or short? You'll answer, it depends. In relation to something shorter, it's long. In relation to something longer, it's short. So in relation to what we want, we say love is good, anger is bad. It's in relation to what we need. So positive karma is the same. In relation to wanting to have a choice, wanting to develop our mind in a positive way. So positive actions create the causes for that to happen. The more positive actions we create, the less obstacle we face when we want to practice the Dharma. And obstacles can be external and they can be internal. So people face these obstacles, part of the study. Boy, my classmates, we all had so many obstacles. On the first day of Parchin, one monk, he was walking and did some circumambulation, and a taxi drove over his foot. He had a broken foot. 3 or 4 of my classmates had tuberculosis, TB. Yeah, they got tuberculosis. And of course it was spread on, you debate. I was lucky I didn't get it, but many of my classmates, 3 or 4, one very high Rinpoche, he had tuberculosis. They got tuberculosis, right? So many obstacles. So when it wasn't external, sickness or the taxi driving over their foot or bed bugs in their room, there was always something, one after the other. So they say it's a good thing, it always comes through. If it wasn't external, it was internal. Okay? And a lot of the times, if you want to practice sincerely, you want to go into a retreat, you don't find anywhere to go. Then you have your money stolen. Then, right, all these external obstacles. And once those are cleared, then internal ones. You don't want to meditate. You just don't want to meditate. Or you have all these doubts, or you have this, you have that. It's just part of the process. Why? Because we've lived our lives for generations, for eons basically, as the opposite of training the mind to be kind and more compassionate. So when we now turn our mind into that direction, there's all this stuff that we accumulated, all these obstacles, which is why accumulating a lot of merit, taking any opportunity to accumulate merit, and literally any opportunity, right? To always, like in the dining room when we go there in the morning, instead of going, all these people chatting, opportunity to practice Donglen, very powerful method. Of course, you can do that in any situation. So the great lamas, they show us how to. Lama Zopa Rinpoche is a good example. He's always making prayers. He's always, any opportunity he has, he's got his room full with symbols of the Buddha, and he sees those symbols as the actual Buddha and accumulates the kind of merit, right? Seeing these statues and showing respect and being inspired and accumulating merit. And he does it in these beautiful ways, like in every action he accumulates merit. No action gets wasted. So this is considered to be really important. So I'm always thinking of Lama Zopa Rinpoche when I think of practice of accumulation. And then practice of definite emergence. That means to practicing the 8 different definite emergence, such as the practicing the 3 objectives. So what is your objective? What do you want to definitely emerge from? What is your goal? So they're all very similar, but just slightly different aspects. You can't really separate them, and they include one another. But anyway, these are the first 10 topics. And I'm not going to go into the second and the third, etc. But the first chapter is really important. In particular, how does it connect to bodhicitta, the true truth, the Four Noble Truth? Because they're all explained together, and they're all familiar to you. Right? Okay, now, as I said, the first of those 10 topics is bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is also described as the generated mind, or mind generation. Mind generation sounds weird, but the generated mind. Have you ever heard that term? In English, you don't really hear that much. It's bodhicitta, mind of enlightenment. But that's a different word in Tibetan. Mind of enlightenment is literally enlightenment of mind. In Tibetan, it's the other way around. Instead of mind of enlightenment, you say enlightenment of mind. Okay. But there's another word that we use much more in Tibetan. That in Tibetan is more used. It's called semgye. Semgye. Sem means mind, and gye means generated. Okay? So I put it here in this very little footnote. The meaning of the term generated mind is that which has generated the mind into a more expansive state. Once you want to become enlightened, you have a very expansive type of mind. Because you're not doing it for your own benefit, but you're doing it for the benefit of all sentient beings. And actually, there are 2 types of aspirations that go along with bodhicitta. What are the 2 aspirations? What are the 2 wishes that need for bodhicitta?
Reach awakening.
Pardon?
Reach awakening.
Reaching awakening, yes.
To free all sentient beings.
To free all sentient beings.